Could it potentially happen? Could the rumors be true? The NFL rumor mill with the trade deadline approaching has been absolutely swirling and going crazy, and the Lions are definitely one of those teams that are at the center of it. We're going to talk about it today's episode, folks, so stay tuned. It started with an owner who had a last name fans despised, hiring a coach that the experts thought was crazy.
But I got a plan, I swear to you.
Who traded for a QB that was said to be washed up. They said the Detroit Lions would never amount to anything, that it would always be the same old Lions. But this team, our team, has a new identity, defined and expressed by the crazy head coach.
Doesn't matter if you have one ass cheek and three toes, I will beat your ass.
Led by the QB that nobody thought was good. Motor City Mania is in full swing and ready to start. So join the show and be prepared for kneecap biting, because Motor City Mania starts right now. Hello everyone, and welcome back to yet another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. I'm your host David T. Pike, and we're diving in right now. And as always, I just want to say, for those that are coming back to the show, thank you all for coming back. I just want to say thank you all for your support, your patronage, your view, and I also want to say to the newcomers that are tuning into the show for the first time, thank you all for your view, thank you all for giving my show a shot. Hopefully I gain your subscription, and to everybody out there, I just want to say God bless, and let's dive into the content. So here's the thing, folks. Like I said in my intro, the NFL rumor mill is just absolutely a buzz right now because there is a lot of information that's coming in. Whether or not it's true, factual, false, doesn't matter. It's a lot of information, and it's definitely swirling. It's definitely in full motion right now. And the reason why is, as I said, the NFL trade deadline is fastly approaching. Right now, today is the 26th of October. The trade deadline is in 5 days, which is on the 31st, Halloween, of all things, trick or treat. And it officially ends, if I recall correctly, at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So in 5 days from now, at the time I'm making this, that's when the NFL trade deadline is going to happen. And so far, we haven't really had a whole lot of trades that have actually happened. But usually when trades happen, they usually kind of go off in bunches. They usually go off like 2 or 3 or 4 because teams are kind of actually making calls. They're trying to vie with one another. They're trying to bid with one another. And so teams are trying to figure out, hey, are we going to be buyers? Are we going to be sellers? So on and so forth. And that's usually based upon how the team is performing. If they're kind of in the middle, they might want to feel like they want to be a buyer. If they're really at the top, they might want to try and bring in that one last person so they could be a contender. And obviously, if you're a team that's doing really, really poorly, you might potentially just want to sell so that way you can get as much draft capital so that way you can start your rebuild for next year. Well, with the Lions are doing really, really well this year. And the reason why they're at the center of all this rumor mill nonsense is because, okay, the Lions, they're 5-2. They're at their best record that they've had since 2017. And you also have to think about this to stack on top of it. The Lions are considered not only one of the best teams in the NFC, they're also considered one of the best teams in the NFL. And furthermore, to kind of get a little bit more specific, the Lions are considered the best team in the NFC North Division. So it's like, listen, the Lions right now are 5-2. If they potentially want to get a little bit better, they potentially want to strengthen their odds to go deeper into the playoffs this year, it might be prudent of them, or as we say in the Army, it might behoove them to go out and get another player by potentially trading. Now, here's the thing. In my honest opinion, there are 3 reasons why I think the Lions actually are most likely going to at least entertain, and I say that with heavy emphasis, at least entertain the idea, the notion of making a trade. Here are the 3 reasons. Reason number 1. The Lions right now are dealing with some injuries, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Our defensive secondary is banged up. We're also having issues, especially with our edge rushers and our pass rush. So it seems like that if the Lions were going to make a move, it would behoove them to go out and get a defensive talent, whether in the defensive secondary, edge rusher, defensive line, whatever the case might be. So that's reason number 1. Reason number 2, also kind of going with the defensive theme here. The Lions just played against AFC bully powerhouse, the Ravens, on Sunday, and for lack of a better term, we absolutely got our asses handed to us on a silver platter by the Ravens by losing 38-6. We lost by 32 points. And while it was a total team failure, it was more in light, it was, how do I put this? The result was more because the defense didn't show up rather than the offense. And that's not to say that the offense didn't have a hand in it. Ben Johnson's game plan wasn't good. Jared Goff didn't play good. Most of the offense didn't play good at all. But again, when you lose by 32 points and you have 38 points scored on you because your defense doesn't show up, yeah, the defense is the reason that you lost. So that's reason number 2. A lot of people feel like the Lions should get an improvement on defense to kind of help them, especially if they're going to go up against some powerhouse teams like the Ravens this year. So that's reason number 2. Reason number 3. I'm going to just say this right now. There was a reason, because I know somebody asked me about, in my comment section, whether or not I was going to make a video about Marvin Jones being released. And I thought about it, and I decided ultimately against doing that because I didn't know specifically what the reasons were as to why Marvin Jones was getting released. And the reason why I'm talking about Marvin Jones, at least in this aspect, is because it's like, okay, the Lions and Marvin Jones agreed to mutually part ways, and so the Lions released him, which means, okay, now that Marvin Jones is no longer on the team, a roster spot has opened up, which means, okay, we're conveniently right across from the trade deadline. The Lions might want to use a new player to fill that roster spot that they just released Marvin Jones from. And I'm just going to say this right now. This has absolutely nothing to do with the video content for today, but I want to offer my condolences and my heartfelt prayers for Marvin Jones, because part of the reason I didn't want to make anything about Marvin Jones was because I didn't know the reason or the situation as to why he and the Lions mutually agreed to part ways and why he was going to focus on his family. The reason why, at least from what I heard from the Lions Twitter page and from other places, is that Marvin Jones lost his son, and that was the reason why he's stepping away from football, so that way he can focus on his family. Again, that's what I heard, and as far as I'm concerned, I offer my heartfelt condolences, my heartfelt prayers for Marvin Jones and his family. Never, ever easy losing a child. So again, heartfelt condolences, heartfelt prayers. Obviously respect their privacy at this time, but again, hopefully he gets that chance to reconnect with his family, get some time spent with them, and focus on them rather than focusing on football. But again, getting back to the whole nature of today's topic, when you think about those reasons that I talked about, which is the Lions are dealing with some injuries on their defense, the Lions defense just got its ass handed to them on Sunday against the Ravens, and the fact with Marvin Jones being released on a mutually agreed settlement, if you will, with the Lions, opening up that roster spot, it seems like the Lions are at least entertaining the idea that they might want to bring in somebody. So those are my reasons. Now, I'm going to just say this. When you think about potential players that the Lions could potentially go after, I know that Lions fans, this is one of the things about Lions fans I never have to worry about potentially when a trade rumor comes up. They always have a proverbial laundry list of potential guys that they want to bring in and add to the team. Now, to be fair, it doesn't matter what side of the ball it is. There's offensive players, there's defensive players. But I'm going to be honest with you. There are 2 reasons why I don't think it's an offensive player that the Lions are potentially going to go after. Number 1, the Lions are not really having a whole lot of problems with their offense. Yes, they've had problems in the third quarter scoring points, but this offense is still a top 10 offense. It's still humming along. It's just had a really bad game against the Ravens. Otherwise, the Lions offense has continued to do what it's always done. So I don't really think that's going to happen, number 1. Here's reason number 2. If you go on Twitter, there are a bunch of people that are NFL insiders, they're NFL analysts that get a lot of source information from people that are directly close with players and with teams. One such individual is by a guy's name of Cam Marino. And what I have is I'm going to put a screenshot of this up. There is a tweet which happened about 2 days ago. Cam Marino said in this tweet that the Lions are aggressively calling around trying to get defensive talent. They are aggressively searching for defensive talent. So, for me, it's like, okay, when you consider the logic of the situation, the Lions need defensive help. And on top of that, let's also kind of take a look at this from the other perspective, because I've talked about this before. If you take a look at how Brad Holmes has gone about his business the last couple of years, first and foremost, let's go to the draft. The last 23 draft picks that Brad Holmes has had, 56.5% of those draft picks have gone towards the defense. The defense continues to be the weakest point for this Lions team. That's not saying that it's totally terrible, but at the same time, the Lions defense is the one that continues to have the most prevalent problems. That's number 1. Number 2, in free agency this year, the Lions spent a lot of money trying to improve said defense. And some of the players that they spent money on are not going to be coming back for a long time, aka Emmanuel Mosley and CJ Gardner-Johnson. So it's like, okay, some of these players and these pieces that you've brought in have either, one, not performed to what you thought they were going to perform, or you haven't seen them perform yet, or two, they're injured and you're not going to get them back for a long time, if at all. So it's like, okay, if I'm Brad Holmes, I'm potentially trying to find a way to replenish the depleted ranks of the defense more so than trying to bring in another offensive weapon or so. So that's my reasoning as to why I think the Lions are going to go defense rather than offense, plus on top of that, Cam Marino's tweet. So, like I've said before, and I will maintain it here and now, I am still skeptical that the Lions are going to trade for anything because, again, Brad Holmes has not really done a whole lot of massive trading in his time as the Lions GM. Again, the biggest trade that he ever did was the very first trade he pulled off, swapping quarterbacks of Jared Goff and Matthew Stafford and getting the 2 first-round draft picks and the 3rd-round draft pick. Ever since then, he's done a lot of very, very small trades where he's not really trading a whole lot of any sort of draft capital. And again, I think that that's pretty much going to be the same route that he goes if he decides to trade at all this year. But like I was just talking about with the Cam Marino tweet, there are also reports that the Lions have been calling teams like the Panthers, Commanders, and other teams that are specifically looking to potentially sell or have disgruntled players. So, let's talk about the most likely candidates, since I mentioned the Panthers and the Commanders, and as the title image definitely shows, there are 2 Panthers and there's 2 Commanders on the screen. Well, here are the 2 likely candidates from both of those teams that I think the Lions might actually inquire for. So let's talk about the Panthers first. The Panthers are definitely in sell mode. They're 0-7 if I recall correctly. They haven't won. Their offensive coordinator is now having play calling duties and responsibilities because Frank Reich has finally relinquished those. So it's like, okay, this team is in total disarray, the Carolina Panthers. They're looking to potentially have something to help build themselves up going into next year. So it's like, okay, when you're at that point, you're definitely a seller. The 2 most likely players that I think the Lions would most likely want to call and inquire about are cornerback Dante Jackson and Brian Burns, linebacker Brian Burns, pardon me, I forgot to put his position in there. But here's the thing, I've talked about both of these guys before, and again, when I take a look at these guys, Dante Jackson is the most likely candidate that we would most likely go after. Here's the reasons why. Number 1, the Lions have a lot of injuries in their secondary right now, and they need help in that secondary room like ASAP, like yesterday. So for me, that's part of the reason. But the other reason is that Dante Jackson, according to PFF, he's only rumored to be like a 4th and a 6th round draft compensation to potentially get him. So it's like, okay, you need help. This guy is somebody that you could probably trade for on the cheap. You could bring him in. That makes sense. Now, I'm going to say this. I love Brian Burns as a player. He's a really aggressive player. He really would fit into what the Lions like to do. But again, from what I'm hearing, the Panthers have been fielding calls for Brian Burns, but they've already pretty much stated that they're most likely not going to trade him, which means it would take some sort of Herculean effort, some sort of Herculean package to get Brian Burns out of Carolina. And again, that just flies in the face of everything that Brad Holmes has done. So while Brian Burns, in my opinion, would be a really great fit as an edge rusher, an outside linebacker that you could use off the edge, I just don't think it's likely to happen. So those are the 2 guys from the Panthers. Let's take a look at the Commanders. The 2 most likely names from the Commanders that I think would most likely happen for at least us is probably Jonathan Allen, the defensive tackle, and Chase Young, who is the end or edge rusher for the Commanders. Now, both of these guys play on the defensive line. Now, I'm going to say this. Out of the 2 that I just presented, Allen and Young, I think the more likely candidate is probably Chase Young. Chase Young has had a lot of problems with injuries in his career. That's definitely going to drop his value. But plus on top of that, the Lions are probably looking for an edge rusher to pair opposite of Aiden Hutchinson to get more sack production on that defense. And that's something that Chase Young was brought into the NFL as a first-round draft pick for the Commanders way back when he was drafted. And from what we're hearing, the Commanders are wanting either a 2nd or a 3rd round draft pick. Now, a 2nd round draft pick, I don't think that's likely to happen. But I'm going to say this, if Brad Holmes feels that the value is equal to a 3rd round draft pick, he might just pull the trigger on getting Chase Young with a 3rd round draft pick. That I could potentially see. Now, with Jonathan Allen, on the other hand, again, I don't think that one's likely to happen for a couple of reasons. Number one, the cap value that would have to be accrued with freaking getting Jonathan Allen. Because currently right now, he's in the middle of like a multi-year deal extension that he made with the Commanders a couple of years ago. His current cap value for him would be about $21 million. Again, the Lions only have about $7 million in cap, so they would have to free up $14 million somewhere else. That's a lot of cap to free up to potentially make a move like that. So that's reason number one. I don't think that's going to happen. Reason number two, you also have to think about this. The Lions have a lot of defensive interior talent that they simply just don't know what they have yet or have not really even used yet. Again, Levi Onwuzurike, really don't know what we have in him just yet. Josh Paschal, really don't know what we have in him either. And then Broderick Martin, we haven't even seen him touch the damn field. So it's like, why would you trade for a guy when you don't really even know what you already have? And then the final reason I don't think we go after Allen is because, again, one of the things that Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell said very specifically is that they are looking for players that fit chemistry of the team first and foremost. And from what I've been hearing about Jonathan Allen, I don't think it's likely to happen because what recently has been coming out from Jonathan Allen is that he's very disgruntled, he's very angry with the team. He literally said that he's tired of losing, and he didn't say that explicitly. He said something a little bit more explicit that I'm not going to say on this show. But the whole point of the matter is, he doesn't sound like a guy that would fit with the chemistry aspect of this team. He's a great talent, but the chemistry's just not there, in my opinion. But from both of those teams, the Commanders and the Panthers, those are the guys that I think are most likely to be the ones that the Lions would go after. I know some people would potentially like to say, well, why not take out Jonathan Allen and potentially entertain the idea of Montez Sweat? I don't really think the Lions are interested in Montez Sweat because it's like, listen, Montez Sweat has more years on his rookie deal, which means it would be a higher dead cap hit for the Washington Commanders if they were to entertain that. If I recall correctly, Chase Young is either in the last year of his rookie deal or has one more year left. So again, less dead cap hit for the Commanders to accrue. Now, I also know this. Like I said, when it comes to trades, there's a lot of people that have various ideas about what they would love to see the Lions potentially do. And again, I don't think the Lions are going to make a big push for a trade before the deadline. But that's not to say that other transactions can't happen. It's just, in my honest opinion, they're either very remote or not likely at all. And I know that there are people out there that have talked about bringing in Max Crosby. Again, I've talked about Max Crosby several times. He would be a great fit for the team. He would be a great fit schematically, chemistry-wise. But the problem is he's going to cost way too much in picks and also in terms of his contract. I know a lot of people want to go out and get Patrick Surtain from the Broncos. But again, the cost to get him is just going to be too much. The Broncos are going to want a huge pound of flesh to get him. There's no way the Lions are going to give up that in draft capital. Then, I also know there are people that are out there saying, hey, why don't we go out and get the king of running backs right now? Why don't we go get Derrick Henry? Here's the thing. In my opinion, he's not a fit for the Lions right now, and here's the reason why. The Lions have both Jahmyr Gibbs and freaking, David Montgomery. Why would you trade for Derrick Henry when, first and foremost, he's 30 years old? If you trade for him, you're in essence trading for a rental, and not even a full-year rental. You're trading for a little bit over than a half a year of renting, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, we got one or two options here. We can either sign an aging running back that's most likely going to start declining very rapidly, or we can just say, hey, we signed a running back in free agency in David Montgomery who's already proven that he can play very well for us, and he's still got 2 years left on his deal. Currently 3 because we're in this point in time. I'm talking about in a future sense. But the point of the matter is, I just don't really see the Lions interested in Derrick Henry because, again, we've already got 2 really good running backs. We're not going to trade for a guy that's already 30 years old. It just doesn't seem to fit. It seems like being desperate and grasping for something. And then I also know people are still potentially talking about Davante Adams. The Raiders have already said they're not trading Davante Adams. They've already blocked it. They're not going to field calls. And again, I've also heard potential people talk about trading for Giants defensive lineman Leonard Williams. Again, the problem with Leonard Williams is the contract that he has. It's a $32 million contract that you'd have to somehow figure out to make that work. And I guarantee you this, the Giants are not going to want to eat the majority of his contract in order to make a trade work. So for me, it's like, listen, all these guys, they sound like great ideas potentially, but the likelihood because of their cost, because of their age, because of the draft picks you have to give up, it's just not feasible. So again, looking at the whole trade aspect, yes, it sounds like a good idea. But again, more likely in my mind is the Lions are most likely going to trade for somebody really cheap, like a Dante Jackson, maybe a Chase Young if they can get that price down a little bit. But it's more likely, in my opinion, if the Lions are going to make any move, it's going to probably be a free agent signing. And again, there's not a whole lot of free agents out there that would fit the defensive needs. Again, the only one that I really think that would make a lot of sense for the Lions is one that I pushed out in my previous episode. I'll put the episode link back up at the top, and that's cornerback Desmond King. And the reason why I'm only saying Desmond King now is because Frank Clark, who I also mentioned in that episode, he's signing with the Seattle Seahawks on a one-year deal now. So it's like, listen, I don't really think the Lions are going to make a huge push to potentially make a move, and I think that's going to really irk some Lions fans. I think that's going to really disappoint them because they want to see Brad Holmes make a move. But again, sometimes the best move is no move at all. Sometimes the best move is standing pat, and I know for Lions fans that's not something they want to hear. But based upon how Brad Holmes has done the building of this roster, he has not done anything with a knee-jerk reaction. And to me, it seems like if you're going to do something like this, it's a knee-jerk reaction. You're doing it out of desperation or because the fans want it to happen. It needs to fit. It needs to make sense. And some of these make some sense, but there's not one out there that's just like, wow, the Lions absolutely have to make this move. So that's just my personal opinion. But again, we'll see what Brad Holmes does. He's got 5 more days until the trade deadline gets here. And again, he can sign free agents any damn time that he wants to. But again, when you only got $7 million worth of cap space to deal with, you ain't really got a whole lot of options because of the money you have. So we'll see what the Lions do. But I think I've done a pretty good job of, again, explaining this whole thing, of, again, putting out my opinion on the whole matter. So I just want to say thank you all for watching yet another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. If by chance you like what you saw, by all means, I highly encourage y'all to do one of these 3 things. Like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. If by chance you subscribed in the past and you forgot to do so at the time, or you just subscribed and you've not yet had a chance to do so, first and foremost, I just want to again highly encourage y'all, please subscribe to the channel. But after you subscribe, make sure you also hit that bell notification icon that goes along with it so that way you never miss any more content that I push out. Again, the subscription numbers are always going up, but we want to make sure you turn on that bell notification icon so that way you guys always come back here as soon as I push out something new. Let's keep having great discussions about the Lions and football in general. Speaking of that, I also encourage y'all, please share this Lions content with your Lions friends and family members. Share it here on YouTube, share it on Twitter, share it on Facebook. Hell, share it anywhere and everywhere that you can with everybody and anybody that you can. Let's keep helping this channel grow by sharing the content so that way we can get more people in. And with that, I just want to again say thank you all for your support. Thank you all for your view, your patronage. Hopefully I gained your subscription today if I hadn't already. And with that, I just want to say God bless. And until the next time we meet, I'll see y'all in the next episode.